My name is Barry, and the topic for today is going to be greed. Is it need or desire? Okay, so I'll be talking about the different aspects of greed, also known as avarice, or simply put, the desire to accumulate. And, accumulation is one thing, but greed is accumulating a lot. And one of the definitions of greed is that one really never has enough. There's always a desire for more and more and more and more. And one never reaches that satiation point where the person says, okay, I've had enough. Nope, doesn't happen. So let me go into a little bit about greed or avarice or accumulation. In our culture, really, it's much more, shall we say, politically correct to say accumulation rather than greed. Greed is not a particularly PC buzzword. I remember in the 80s, there was Wall Street movie that was all about greed, and greed was good, but now it's not. So there's different reasons for greed and different ways of accumulating. So let me go into them briefly. One way of accumulating is simply what our society has been taught over and over and over again by Wall Street, by Madison Avenue, by all the advertising, by the whole movement of keeping up with the Joneses. It has to do with material possessions. And we are told that the more material possessions you have, the better life you will live. So most people tend to buy into it. And they just start buying. Oh, look at that. It's so pretty. I know I have 3 at home, but this one is so nice. So let me get this one. And before you know it, you have 4 of them. Well, what do you need with 4 of them? So 3 of them go in the attic. And then you totally forget about it. And then you go shopping a few months later and you say, oh, look at this. It's so, before you know it, you have a 5th one. People do that all the time. And then the attic gets piled high. Then eventually they go through the attic, empty it out, and say, oh, look at all this space I have. So they can buy more. People often accumulate to the extent that they have space available. Not an unheard of phenomena. So let me talk about why this happens. Well, it is programming. It's cultural programming, societal programming. But there's also a sense that the more stuff you have, the old saying, whoever has more wins. Yeah, until you die, and then you can't take it with you, and then it's like, did this really make me happy? I have this large house that's crammed full of stuff. I like the stuff, but how did it help me? Did it give me a life full of joy? Did it give me a sense of fulfillment, completion? Certainly not a sense of spiritual connection. So why is Western culture so very susceptible to these messages from advertisers? And I think the answer to that is pretty direct. Most people do not have a sense of wholeness and completeness, a sense of security within themselves. And if you're lacking that, you seek to get it from the outside. Well, the outside can't really provide security. I mean, yeah, it can provide security as in, okay, you can alarm your house, you can have guards around a subdivision, etc., etc. That's not the security I'm talking about. I'm talking about the inner security. The security that says, okay, I'm a strong person, I'm a good person, and I can handle whatever life throws at me. Well, that kind of security is unfortunately somewhat rare. Most people have all kinds of securities that are missing. It can be low self-esteem, lack of self-worth, a variety of dynamics. But without that inner sense of security, one never feels one is quite good enough. So you buy, and you buy, and you just keep buying. Not everybody does it because they're insecure. Some people just really take on the messages of Western culture that more is better and live it out without actually stopping to think and challenge that belief. Is this really true? Is more really better? Now, in some things, it is. But in most things, not necessarily. In most things, more is simply just, as the old saying goes, more is more. So let's look at what happens that causes people to have this and what can we do about it? Well, first of all, that sense of vulnerability to all the advertising campaigns, to the messages throughout Western culture, that really comes from the lack of parents really knowing how to make their children feel secure. Most parents want the best for their kids. They want to give them a sense of integrity, of wholeness, of strength. Do you know anyone who actually was taught how to do this? I imagine there are plenty of books on the subject, but books are more for the ego. But when you actually do it, you need someone to sit down and teach you, to role model for you. And what happens, I would say maybe 98% of the time, is we either raise our children based on the way we were raised, or we raise our children based on the opposite of how we were raised. I'll give you an example. If our parents are very, very protective, loving but protective, then we'll be loving and protective, which means the parent provides that sense of boundary, safety, and security, and the child never develops it for themselves. On the other hand, if children are abused, yelled at, hit, then they say, I'm never going to do that to my kid. So what do? We enter the permissive society where parents don't really know how to discipline their kids. They believe that hitting, yelling, screaming is bad, which it is, but they don't have any alternatives. So when the kid says, I want to throw this vase and let's see if it makes a hole in the wall, the parents don't really know what to do. I've met so many people who have like 2, 3, 4-year-olds and they say, I don't know what to do. I just can't control them. They do whatever they want. They're the rulers of the house, not me. That's really a very sad statement in our society, that people have so much given up their sense of parenthood, sense of power, that they do not know how to raise their kids. It's not that they want to be bad parents. They don't want to be bad parents. So therefore, they enable their kids to do whatever the kids want to do, hoping that the kids will grow up to be safe and secure. But that's not the way it works. Kids need to know boundaries. The way you develop safety and security is for parents to set very clear boundaries and say, these are the things you can do, these are the things you cannot. And if you do these things, I'm not going to be happy with you. Well, that's not done. parents are not taught how to do this. So therefore, kids don't get that proper boundary. They don't get the proper guidance. In the old days, it used to be provided by a slap on the head, hitting someone in the rear, timeout, no dinner, or just a good whack on the head and a yelling fest. All of which sort of taught the person how to not do things, and they knew where their boundaries were, but that does not make them a particularly empathic or loving individual. It makes them an individual who tends to be very rule-bound and scared. Not, again, ideal. So what are some recommendations? Well, make it clear, no matter what happens, and a lot of parents are really good at this, saying no matter what you do, I'm angry at you, I don't like you right now, but I will always love you. That's good. But then they don't know how to follow up and say, but this is really making me very unhappy. And I'm just really sad that you do these things. You don't want to do guilt, because this can very easily go into guilt, but rather make the child understand that you love them and you want them to have a good life. And if they do certain things, you're not going to be happy. And a child who is caring and empathic and loving is not going to want to make their parent unhappy. So they will learn pretty quickly, oh, I don't want to make mommy sad, so this is what I should do, and then mommy will be happy and proud of me. Every child wants approval. Every child needs to know that they're okay, what they're doing is good. Not that it's the best. Children don't need to know that. They need to know that their parents love them, and that whatever they're doing, they will always have the love, not just through words, but demonstrated through action. So this is what I would recommend that parents start doing for their kids. Another thing is to be consistent, because a big problem that children have is that parents are not consistent. It depends upon the mood that they're experiencing. If they're in a good mood, oh, that's okay, you can do it this time. And if the parent had a hard day at work and the kid has this little problem, how dare you? Not good, because then the child doesn't know what to expect. So they're always sort of scared. They always have a sense of insecurity. So without that, security is really not the easiest thing to build in a child. And it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes repetition. But if one can do that, and God, it would be wonderful if there were really classes that effectively taught people how to be good parents. There are child rearing classes and child practice classes, but it's not widespread. And it's generally the highly educated and highly motivated. And, it does cost money. So significantly affluent parents who can afford to take these courses and take the time off from work, because many times they are offered during the day. Though there are night classes available, but it's not so easy to find them. And, sometimes it's just lecture. But what parents really need is not so much lecture as group dynamics, group interaction. Okay, this is what the teacher says to do, and when I got home, I tried to do it. But then he started crying, and I didn't know what to do. So I just said, oh, that's okay, honey. You can do that this time. And then he smiled, and he knew he can get away with it. So the next time he did it again. I don't know what to do. I know I'm supposed to, but how do you handle it? An excellent reason for a group. The object here, okay, getting back to the subject of greed and accumulation, is why do people do it? Because it makes them feel, at least temporarily, safe and secure. Oh, look, I bought this new thing. Isn't it fantastic? And you focus your energy on the new thing you bought. And you temporarily forget that I'm really scared all the time. I've met so many people who have a constant state of low-level anxiety or fear. Some know it's fear. Most just see it as anxiety. But it's all the same thing. It's a lack of being grounded in yourself, having this sense of security. I can do. I know everything will be good. They don't have that. So my recommendation is, since one can't go back and lead one's childhood all over again and say, Mommy, Daddy, this is what I need you to do so that when I grow up, I'm going to be a nice, secure individual. Doesn't work. So what I can do and what I do is I take people down to their core, down in their subconscious, have them take a look, and they tell me, you know, there's this emptiness, this hollowness. I can't tell you how many people say they have an emptiness in the middle of their third chakra, which is the area where it's interaction between the self and the other, between the self and the world. And they find a hole, and then we have to find a way to fill the hole. Ideally, with love, self-love, that comes from the base of the self, and it's generally seen as a warm white light. And people can bring up that light with a little bit of practice and start to fill the third. Sometimes people need to draw it from without. People who are spiritual or religious can bring down divine light, God's light, the light of the Christ, and fill that part and feel okay. The object, when you do this, is to know how to be in touch all the time and not just do it temporarily. Because, you know, what's the point of a quick fix? And then you go home and you don't have it anymore. My personal recommendation is for self-love, because once you really have access to it, it doesn't go away. Bringing down love from the outside rather than the inside, regardless of how high the source, is dependent upon your continuing to have that external connection. And people in this culture get busy and they forget. And before you know it, you're back to square one. So this has been a somewhat rambling talk. I hope I've covered different aspects of it. And I hope there's some information here that's of value. And if you have any questions, comments, or wish to book an appointment, I'd love to talk with you. Thank you. Until the next time.